Hey, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Ask a Brother podcast. I'm your host, Jeff St. James, and I'm super excited about this episode. I'm sorry for the delay, but between the traveling and the interviews, your boy has been quite busy. And today's episode is titled How to Stop Arguing and or Debating with Women. And this is episode 6 of my individual content. I'm super excited about this. I've gotten a lot of requests in the comments about this. But before I jump into the episode specifically, I do want to get into the habit of always shouting out the subscribers and the members that have been supporting this channel since it first started and since you all have come about. As of right now, we are at 23,688 subscribers. So shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all. Really appreciate it. And super grateful for just the support of seeing what this is turning into. And, can't wait to see by the end of the year what our total subscriber count and, family and whatever we want to call this thing as far as the community turns into. So rather than delay and kind of make all the announcements, I'll save those for my lives. I will jump straight into this. So again, this is episode 6, and it is titled How to Stop Arguing with Women / Debating with Women. Obviously, this is targeted towards men specifically, but there is some key points that I think both men and women can learn from it. And I can see myself in the very near future doing another episode for the opposite, flipping it and saying how to stop arguing with men and seeing potentially how, that could potentially be very helpful. So, this is just something I've been observing, things I've been testing out myself over time and seeing with many patients and clients. And I think that many of the things that I'm going to make as far as observations today, just see if you think it makes sense and why not try it in your own homes and relationships and see if potentially it could be helpful. So before we get into the prescriptions and the suggestions and the strategies, let's start with what this is not. This is not a way to shut down legitimate areas of concern relating to abuse, cheating, and neglect. This is more so about normal communication barriers and challenges. So fellas, please don't use my videos and weaponize my videos and content to shut down your wives and girlfriends. That's not really the point of this. I think one of the express goals that I have is for us to better understand each other, and that for men to understand women more, and for women to understand men more, and for us to understand ourselves more. So let's set that aside. Please, let's just take it for what it is and not try to use it as a weapon and say, see, I got a guy that confirms what I'm saying, because it's really more so about making sure each side better understands and gets what it is that we're trying to do, which is life together. So although this is targeted towards men, I'm going to say this specifically to ladies because I know some of you are watching this. You don't get to reject correction and demand protection. So this entire episode that I'm about to do today is for women who are open to the idea of being corrected at times, open to feedback. You don't get to reject any and all forms of feedback, reject being corrected ever, and reject correction and demand protection. So very quickly, over the course of this episode, men are going to start to learn and observe many of the traits of those who are interested genuinely and receiving feedback, correction, and accepting leadership and what that looks like. And those are the types of women that they should be prioritizing in terms of maintaining and establishing relationships with. So ladies, no, you do not get to reject correction and demand protection. Now, fellas, my view when it comes to arguments, and I've obviously struggled with it at times as well, is that you've already lost as a man if you are arguing with a woman, especially with a woman who you are not even responsible for. What good is a captain where no one on the ship listens or respects his authority? So the initial goal for this particular episode that I'm going to pitch is that I need you as men to start to get better at distinguishing two different types of women, because this matters when it comes to many of the strategies that I'm going to try to introduce. These strategies will not work on and with all women in all circumstances, but generally, There's two different types of women when it comes to feedback. The first group of women are those that you can distinguish the way in which they tend to internalize feedback based on their either initial or soon afterwards responses, where they will either find it encouraging, they will find it helpful, they may even be thankful and even praise you for bringing to mind things that perhaps they weren't aware that they need to improve on. Now, granted, if you're not doing the things that I'm going to suggest well throughout this episode, it may not matter what type of woman she may be, especially if you're not doing many of the very specific things that I think are essential to maintain a healthy dynamic between two parties. But is she the type that tends to internalize feedback and responds more favorably to it, appreciative of it, does see it as somewhat helpful, and may even thank you and even maybe, praise you for the fact that, you were able to articulate it in a way in which she could receive it and hear it. And she knows that she can better serve, support, and love you as a result of it. Or distinguishing the two types in terms of how they tend to internalize feedback. Does she only see it as complaints, attacks, and that she's a victim? Her reactions and her responses are going to very easily let you know, generally speaking, what type of woman it is that you're doing life with, living with, and in a relationship with. Does she tend to approach receiving feedback in one of those two spheres? Regardless of which one she presently is, your first option is to listen to the rest of this episode, try and implement it, and see if she can be in the first category, even if she hasn't been that for quite some time. Now, I had recently used this when I had this analogy when I was meeting for an interview with Call Me Shape, his podcast, and we had discussed the idea of arguing with women and what are the fruits of it and how to kind of get away from conversations being so adversarial. And I had used this analogy and I tried to think about it a little bit more deeply to better break down exactly what I mean. So I view arguing with women, especially as men, as something close to an oncoming car crash. When you first start seeing tensions rise, where both parties are starting to get very elevated, tone, volume, just body posture, is very, very clear that we're really about to get into it. It's starting to get very contentious. Words are starting to get exchanged left and right. And this is about to go south. That's kind of like how I view an oncoming car crash. You see what's coming if this momentum continues. That very, very small thing in the distance is very quickly starting to get bigger and bigger as the car gets closer. You are clearly going to quote unquote crash. The most obvious thing to do when you want to avoid a crash is to start using and tapping on the brakes, slowing things down. So in regards to a conversation, especially with your female counterpart as a male, how would you tap the brakes? How would you slow down? One of the first things I highly recommend, typically when people are arguing and very contentious, there's no brakes. Each person is just going at it, trying to get the last word in, trying to get louder, quicker, sharper in their words, because each person is attempting to quote unquote try to win. Instead, as men, what if you start to count to either 5 or 10 before you respond? Slowing down the speed of which you're heading in the wrong direction verbally. Giving yourself that 5 to second pause is the first step, I believe, of giving yourself a fighting chance of not saying something that you may end up regretting later on. Now, you can, granted, wait the 5 to 10 seconds and then curse or go off and explode, but you get the point. Slow down and stop modeling and following after her in terms of how quickly she's trying to go back and forth with you. And then even when you do decide to start to speak, try to objectively observe yourself trying to listen more than it is that you are responding. The person who has to have a last word, who has this impulsive reflex to keep talking and keep saying something over and over and over, isn't actually listening. They're just waiting to respond. So count 5 to 10 seconds before you say something. Start attempting to listen for more duration of time than it is for you to respond or say something. Now, this is the key part. Lowering your tone and volume. This is very difficult for a lot of men, particularly and especially if the woman in which they're with is starting to raise her volume and her tone. My view and lens of this is, and I'll get back to, when I'll touch on it a little bit more, but if you're matching her in terms of trying to react and respond to everything she's saying as quickly as possible, if you're trying to match her in tone, if you're trying to match her in volume, I think that's grounds for acknowledging who's actually leading this interaction. And it's not you. As you start to slow down, and you're now counting 5 to 10 seconds before you say to your next statement, you're starting to try to listen more than it is than respond. And you're attempting to lower and slow down what you're saying, how you're saying it. Your next attempt is to try to actually become a little bit less accusatory. Up until this point, and in previous arguments, you have no problem using the word you. I would suggest the way in which you can start to help her and both parties to start to de-escalate is to turn the attention onto yourself. Instead of coming off very accusatory towards her and saying, you didn't do this and you did that. Start with me and I. Now, there will be men in the comments. Why do we have to go through all of this? Why can't they just be treated like adults? Listen, I will get to that at the end for why I think there needs to be nuance to how men need to see women and how women need to see men. But those men in the comments will prioritize the need to be right and feel right in the moment versus the goal being for us to be good. They would rather win the battle based on pride and ego than focus on the goal of us being good in order to de-escalate the tension. Second piece to slowing down the conversation, thus tapping on the brakes. Becoming less reactive. Extremely difficult for very emotional males who, despite their belief that they're so much better and superior to their women or female counterparts, when I see two people arguing in the streets, they both look like adults that haven't figured out how to handle themselves quite well. And just because you do it behind closed doors doesn't really make you that much substantially better. So again, when I was talking with Shape, I had used the dodgeball analogy of any person who grew up playing dodgeball knows that when the ball is being thrown, every single time the ball is being thrown, you shouldn't be dropping to the ground and doing backflips and doing hurdles and ducking. You tend to do that when you believe the ball is actually somewhat close to actually hitting you. If they're throwing the ball 20 feet away from me to somebody else, what am I reacting for? Everything in the course of a conversation with a woman doesn't need to be reacted to or responded to, especially instantaneously and impulsively. The reason why I'm suggesting this, believe it or not, when you, rather than feeling like every single word, every single attack, every single thing that may not even be true, many, many men struggle with having to try to correct and address every single thing that they believe isn't lining up with their perception and even their view of reality. In that moment, when emotions are high, you have to stop assuming that people are using rationality and reason and logic in that moment. They're not. They're not. Especially when emotion is dominating the space. So you trying to lean in harder and harder is actually potentially just communicating to the other party that their feelings don't matter. And when you're communicating to them that their feelings don't matter, what's an immature response potentially going to be? An ad hominem, an attack, an outright statement that both you and they know isn't true, but in the moment they feel like it's true. I would suggest that rather than reacting to every word, every statement, and every claim, if you slow down in your responses, if you listen more than you're willing to respond in a moment, and you lower your volume and tone, and you're not reacting to every single thing that's being said and trying to be like the Matrix and dodge all these bullets, the question I would ask is, who actually in this moment is in control of your actions? Is it you? Or is it her emotions? Are you in control of what you're going to say and how you're going to react and respond? Are you compelled and forced to say or do something because of someone else? This is a different level of self-control that, when mastered, or at least when done well, you'll begin to start to realize that you're no longer a victim and a reactor to anything, any and everything that's happening within the relationship and just in life in general. That you actually do have more control than perhaps you thought you did. Connected to the question of who is in control of your emotions, this is where leadership matters. Being the captain on a boat when the weather is great and everything's going well and there's no crises. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but kind of anybody can be captain then. It's when something's wrong with the sails, when there's an engine failure, when you run out of coal, when the weather is starting to shift. That's when leadership and calmness and direction and focus matters the most. Leading in the area of arguments and conversations and debates, especially with women, in order to consider yourself the leader, you have to be willing to take the hit. You are the shield to the relationship. Obviously, I'm not speaking in terms of abuse. But what I'm suggesting is, if there's a moment when something is going to be said and somebody's going to get hurt by it, do you want to be the one that's the leader who gets to do that to your wife or girlfriend? If someone is going to make the mistake of saying something harmful or saying something they shouldn't do, should that be you as the man, as the leader, as you call it? Or should the person or people who's most prone to struggling with what to say, how to say it, and needing extra grace going to be your wife, your girlfriend, or a child? Leading. taking the initial hit, shielding the relationship from the onslaught of whatever happened, whatever interpretation of what happened, and whatever words are being exchanged. You put down your weapon and put up your shield. And you start using the word me and we, what we need to improve on, so as to get substantially better at turning the attention off of her feeling like it's an attack and you are being accusatory towards her, towards trying to focus on what it is that you need to change. And from a relationship standpoint, what we need to do. Any woman who is semi-mature, semi-likes you or loves you, is going to start to recognize that you're not actually talking to her, but you're talking about yourself and you're talking about us as a relationship. So instead of saying, you need to grow up, you were wrong, you're an idiot, I don't know what's wrong with you. Instead of, you know what? Even if I disagree with you right now, I know that I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret. So you know what? I'm going to give us 10, 15 minutes, or we're going to revisit this a few hours from now. But I care about you and I care about us to not want to take this in a direction where I might say something I might regret. Even if I don't understand exactly where you're coming from, I'm willing to slow down and not really say too much more and just hear whatever it is that you got to say. And then when I think that I'm in a good place where I can communicate better with you, I'm going to try to check in with you for why you felt and saw things the way that you did. Leadership. It is only your pride and ego that makes you not feel you need to do that. For a lot of men, when it comes to these conversations and debates and arguments, it's only pride and ego that commands and demands that you get immediate results in that moment at the height when emotions are at their worst. If from a religious Christian background perspective, even God in the garden did not get perfect obedience. So what makes you think you ain't got no Garden of Eden and you not God? So who convinced you that you're going to always get instantaneous, immediate, emotional, and verbal results to the way of your liking? Humility, pride, and ego demands results in that moment. You have less patience, you have less time. And instead, if you set the humility, the pride, the ego aside, you're probably going to go from acute accusations and direct attacks to open questions and being more open to her feelings and why she feels that way. So when she says something that you know isn't true, when she says something that you can go back and play the recording and you know you can prove it, that it didn't happen in the way in which she's articulating it. If you became more interested in what she's feeling and why she's feeling it, and less at telling her that her feelings and opinions and views are wrong in that moment, you may be allowed during the course of the conversation to add clarity to help explain how and why her feelings and conclusions ended up in the way in which they did. For many of us, we struggle with not wanting to validate certain things. And because we don't validate the initial emotion, we are never able to get to the place of where they got to that emotion to begin with, especially in terms of the conclusions they started making off the initial premise. He doesn't listen to me. He always says that I'm wrong. He always says that I'm dumb. Why would somebody who believes and experiences that believe that you're a safe enough person that's going to allow them the space to get all of this out. Again, fellas, my suggestion when you really think about this is when you change the you for we and the your for us, what you're attempting to do is externalize the issue or the problem outside of the person you're talking to. Even, I would say, outside of the relationship. So now you're putting a separation between the problem and your partner, the issue and your wife or girlfriend. You know what? I feel like we're starting to get a little bit hype right now, and I think that we're getting to a place that we don't need to go to. So I think it's best for us to just slow down right now. And I'm just going to listen right now, or I think we need to cool down, give ourselves some time to kind of get to a better place where we can talk better to each other. And then I'll check in with you and see if you're ready, and then we can kind of try this again. That's very different than you have an attitude. You're the problem. You need to watch your mouth. You need to calm down. Not us. Not we need to calm down. You need to calm down. You see how you're probably going to get to probably different responses to that? That is, believe it or not, what leadership and taking ownership of the relationship is. Especially up front, it sometimes and often looks like taking the initial blame, taking accountability for the continued direction of it, and your willingness or lack thereof to approach things through this lens reflects whether or not you have the mindset of a man who's actually a leader or the mindset of a man who's actually single and trying to do life with another woman. So I have 3 C's that I think will be very helpful in terms of communication. You need to speak clearly, concisely, and last C, constructively. As you become more concise with your words and more intentional, if you're slowing down and speaking clearly, and that's the kicker, that's the one that a lot of us as men trip up on. If you can figure out ways to be more constructive versus accusatory or destructive, you're giving and extending an olive branch throughout the course of the duration of the interaction. That's what you're doing. If she is anything close to a good woman, soon after, later on, or perhaps later on the next day, she will acknowledge that she overreacted. She will acknowledge what you tried to do. And she will even appreciate your willingness to attempt to not match her in her emotional intensity. There's nothing worse for a woman who emotionally is being led by her feelings and emotions, to be constantly getting triggered by a man who's being led by his. Now, I already know what some of the comments are going to be at the end. We don't need to do this, and the abuse and the coddling. It doesn't matter. This is not about accepting abuse. I don't know how many times I have to say it. It's not actually about coddling. Versus recognizing biological and psychological differences between the sexes and making room for women that show signs of a willingness to grow, to apologize, to accept feedback, and be led. That's what it's about. It's not about abuse and coddling. It's just simply recognizing the reality that men and women have some inherent differences and accounting for what those differences are and rewarding the women who show the signs of a willingness to grow, to apologize, to accept feedback, and to be led. And if she never apologizes, if she never accepts feedback and always questions your views and your decisions, she's not for you. So what's the need to continue to try to win the debate? You're not that guy, and she's not that woman. This is not about guaranteeing that you will never have communication challenges with women again, that they will instantly respond well to you, and that you'll never have relationship issues. It is about an attempt on your part to improve the way you try to communicate with women. They still have a right and autonomy to disagree and agree, to stay or to leave, regardless of if she is an acquaintance, a lover, a friend, a girlfriend, or wife. What you have control over is you. What you have control over is you. How you show up, how you engage, and how you respond. So this is not about centering one's life around women, their demands, and their feelings and emotions. It is actually about understanding the codes of life to integrate an entirely different system of thoughts, emotions, and experiences into your own realm of existence in life. You must learn how to hold, nourish, and protect the soul that you are given, that you claim, that you want in the season when you have it in your hands. Your job as a man is to learn the music to her soul, to get her to dance with you. That's how I believe we can begin to get better and not arguing and debating with women. I hope this was helpful. Can't wait to see y'all for the next episode where I talk about more about what it means to be a master communicator. Make sure you like and share this content. Feel free to donate or become a member if you see fit. And thank y'all for your time. God's on out. Peace.